Hey guys, what's going on? Wayne here. So look, we're a few weeks away from the inspiration for this video, but I guess technically we're a few years away from the initial inspiration of this video. But I guess this year's inspiration for this video, what kind of put me over the top in terms of making it for the channel, is that it was CES, and that is the Consumer Electronics Show. But I still wanted to talk about this kind of overall question here a bit on machine heads, because like I said, it is a question that I've kind of been pondering to myself kind of very quietly over the last few years. And this is the question: why are heavy equipment manufacturers like Caterpillar, Kubota, John Deere, why are these heavy equipment manufacturers exhibiting at a trade show like CES, the Consumer Electronics Show? Now, one key to this question is electronics. I mean, construction equipment, farm equipment, industrial equipment, it involves electronics. They have electronics, but traditionally, these machines are not in and of themselves electronics. And by electronics, like TVs, appliances, stuff like that, stuff that you would find in the electronics department of an old department store. But I guess the primary key to my question here is the word consumer. This is supposed to be a show that isn't aimed at professionals, but is aimed instead at consumers. CES is a show, like I said, that used to be solely about gadgets and gizmos and home technology like TVs, robot vacuums, and Bluetooth accessories. Now, it is still mainly about those things, but it has also increasingly become a place for industrial technology solutions to make splash announcements as well. So how the whole thing kind of shakes out today is, for every massive tech company exhibiting at CES, there are 10 startup companies and small companies looking for their big break on this big stage. And because of this, CES has kind of become an annual quasi-World's Fair. We used to have these World's Fairs back in the 20th century that were kind of aimed at, showing people the future, right? And what they ultimately became was a place for massive corporations to kind of come together and brag about how they were going to contribute to that future. That's really what CES has become. It's become a show focused on the products building and shaping the world of the future. And because it's a good idea for companies to signal to not just their customers, but to shareholders and investors that their products are a big, indispensable part of shaping this world to come, it's a good idea for big companies to be present at CES now. So that's really mainly why you started to see kind of, this word sounds a little hostile, encroachment on CES from industries that for decades really kind of stuck to their own trade shows, to their own industries, if you will, like car makers, for instance. They used to only show at car shows. You used to have to go to auto shows to see new cars and concept cars. Those companies are showing at CES now. Construction equipment and farm equipment manufacturers, they only exhibited at construction trade shows. But now, fast forward to 2025, now everybody wants to exhibit at CES because of that World's Fair vibe that the show has now. So let's talk a little bit about why that's happening specifically with heavy equipment OEMs, why that makes sense, and we're going to take a look at, before we kind of get into the deeper question, we're going to take a look at the announcements that these companies made at CES in 2025. Let's dig in. All right, so 5 equipment brands exhibited, or at least took part in CES 2025 this year. That was Caterpillar, John Deere, Volvo Group, Kubota, and Coyote Tractor. Now, Volvo Group, their announcements were really kind of keynote related. The Volvo Group CEO kind of gave a presentation, so it wasn't strictly focused on equipment. It was more on how they're going to be contributing to combating climate change, how they're going to, lead the way in alternative fuels, stuff like that, not only on the equipment side, but also on their logistics side, transportation side. But we're going to kind of put them off in their own corner. We're going to focus really on like the companies that had like actual equipment at the show. So let's take a look at what each of the 4 companies that we're going to focus on announced, and then we'll kind of break down the wider conversation and why these companies see the value in exhibiting at CES at all. So we'll start with Caterpillar. Caterpillar launched its centennial celebration at CES 2025, and that basically means that they are celebrating. It was kind of like a big deal for them to be at this show because they're celebrating their first 100 years as a company. And so kind of the theme of the booth at CES 2025 was celebrating, the company's history over the last 100 years and then trying to maybe put out what they're envisioning for the next 100 years. And so the star of the show at CES for Caterpillar was a retrofit 972 wheel loader prototype that Caterpillar calls an extended range electrified machine. Now, to me, this was really kind of all the equipment. I'm definitely biased toward the construction industry here, but for me, this was kind of definitely the most interesting thing from an equipment manufacturer to show at the show. It's a really interesting concept. Essentially, this 972 works a bit like one of those electric drive haul trucks that you'd see within a mining operation. The machine is electric drive and it's battery powered, but it's also outfitted with a diesel generator for extended range, essentially. So this generator, the way it works is that it runs AC power to a rectifier, which converts energy from AC to DC. And then that energy can be used to either charge the wheel loader's battery, drive the machine itself, or do both. So in the end, out of this 972 retrofit, you essentially get the benefit of having an electric wheel loader, but without the headache of trying to figure out how am I going to keep this thing charged? Now, Cat says this 972 is just as powerful and productive. That's been a common theme. I think a lot of folks, when they think about electric machines, the first thing they worry about is this going to be as powerful as my diesel-powered machine? Caterpillar says that this 972 is just as powerful, just as productive as its diesel counterpart. But obviously, because it's battery powered, it can be charged overnight, and it can be charged, and this is kind of a big deal, it can be charged on a regular utility grid connection at 240 volts. Then once you've got the 972 charged, it can be driven on 100% battery power for several hours. And then at that point, whenever your battery's depleted, you're kind of faced with the decision. Either you recharge it with the 240 volt connection, or you switch on that onboard diesel generator. All right, so let's move on to John Deere. While Caterpillar focused on electrification, John Deere focused its exhibit on autonomy. And that kind of makes sense because autonomy really kind of stretches across both the farming part of its business and the construction part of its business. At the show, Deere showed 4 autonomous machines that are benefiting from its new 2nd generation autonomy kit. Now, those 4 machines included the 9RX tractor for large scale agriculture, a 5ML orchard tractor for air blast spraying, an electric mower aimed at commercial landscaping, and a 460P tier articulated dump truck that is aimed at quarry applications. And again, kind of the point of the Deere booth is that we've got one autonomous kit that is enabling autonomous operation on all 4 of these machines. So we've kind of got this autonomous base that we're able to spread not just through one category, but through our farming and our construction industries kind of across these different machines. So the kit that enables automation or autonomous operation on these machines, the way that it works is that it combines advanced computer vision. Of course, there's AI kind of involved in all of this, along with cameras to allow the machines to navigate their environments autonomously. Now, one other interesting note about this 2nd generation autonomy kit is that, some machines are going to come from the factory autonomy ready, kind of pre-installed with this kit. But they're also going to be making this retrofit kit available for retrofitting existing machines as well. All right, so like John Deere, Kubota also focused its showing at CES 2025 on autonomy and AI. Kubota exhibited the AgriConcept 2.0, an electric tractor concept that can be driven manually or run autonomously. Kubota also unveiled AI-powered agriculture tools and solutions including a robotic pruner, a smart plant imager, and an autonomous chemical sprayer that can scout crops to identify pests and then spray with precision and efficiency basically just making sure that it's spraying in the right places and just the right amount of chemicals so that you avoid spray drift and overspraying. And on the construction side, Kubota exhibited its KX038-4E electric excavator and its prototype hydrogen engine genset. Now, we've seen that electric excavator at shows before. It's still in the prototype form. Kubota's still kind of showing it off and kind of gathering feedback on that machine. We're definitely excited to kind of see when that machine launches, hopefully in the next couple of years. But on the genset side, this is definitely something that Kubota started talking about more and more. So they've got this electrification story that they're telling with the excavator, compact excavator, but then they're also working, and I think as they should be, on this hydrogen engine. Kubota isn't the only manufacturer working on a hydrogen engine. Komatsu has talked about their work in kind of hydrogen. Volvo in the past several years has talked about how they believe kind of hydrogen will be the fuel of choice in the future on large machines. Now, Kubota notes that this hydrogen genset matches the portable power of its diesel models, but has the benefit of a quiet, clean hydrogen engine. So the power density issue around hydrogen and diesel, it kind of shakes out to being almost equal, but the way that it technically works is that hydrogen has less power density than diesel by volume, but actually has more density than diesel by weight. So essentially, in terms of pound for pound, hydrogen, in terms of the weight, hydrogen can actually provide you by weight more power density than diesel, but in terms of the space that it actually takes up, diesel is more power dense. So it's an interesting engineering problem to solve kind of moving forward. I think also kind of like the production of hydrogen and getting that whole kind of apparatus going is something that we are still very far off on, kind of similar to how we're very far off on having like the grid and the infrastructure for, you know, nationwide charging for electric vehicles, though those things are getting better. But it's cool to see Kubota working not just on electric and battery, but also on this hydrogen genset. But maybe the coolest showing from Kubota at CES 2025 was its KATR robot. I don't know if it's Cater or KATR. We're gonna go with KATR. But this is an all-terrain, multifunctional robot that is aimed at carrying cargo around farms and construction job sites. And Kubota says that it maintains a level cargo deck when working on uneven terrain, and it can work autonomously or remotely. And that is definitely kind of another trend that we're seeing from industrial manufacturers recently, is these robots that can kind of work as cargo carriers, carry stuff around job sites and things like that. All right, so rounding out the list of equipment makers at CES 2025, is Coyote Tractor. Now, Coyote displayed an RX 7340 utility tractor alongside an agricultural robot, kind of similar to how Kubota did. Now, that RX 7340 utility tractor, they also had kind of like a, almost like a virtual display kind of set up within the tractor, so you could hop in the tractor and get kind of like this simulation of the future that they're envisioning this tractor kind of working in. Part of that was AI, so how AI is going to intersect with agricultural work. But the Coyote robot is really, to me, the more interesting kind of part of this pair that they had at the show. The Coyote robot's AI software can respond to voice commands and its environment, and it has the ability to autonomously carry out various tasks. So whereas the Kubota was more like a cargo carrier, the Coyote is really more of like a task robot that you can kind of order around. So Coyote demonstrated the robot in a strawberry field scenario, showing how the robot could carry out end-to-end tasks based on a single AI model. And that went from transplanting strawberry seedlings to removing unnecessary runners and managing the overall growth cycle of the strawberry plants themselves. Okay, so that kind of rounds out what these companies announced at CES 2025. And just in case you couldn't tell by the overwhelming kind of evidence in what we just discussed, each manufacturer showing at CES 2025, the reasons that the equipment manufacturers are exhibiting at CES, like the purpose, what they're kind of like talking about at CES, the metaphorical doors in which these companies walk through to kind of gain entry into a trade show that is focused on tech and products shaping the future, right? The reasons that they're at this show, there's really three reasons, right? Electrification, remote control, and autonomous control. Now, within the context of equipment made for the construction and agriculture industries, autonomous control as a buzzword has kind of slowly morphed over the last, 5 to 7 years into the dominant buzzword that has taken over all industries today: artificial intelligence, AI. And the reason for this is that the promise that autonomy holds for ag and construction is basically the ability for farmers and for contractors to cope with labor shortages or skilled labor shortages by being able to program your equipment fleets from the office and then watch as a site takes shape with either no one at all in the cab or someone there just to kind of make sure nothing goes extremely wrong. And in and of itself, autonomy is nothing new in terms of the conversations these companies have been having with their customers and their shareholders for the last several years. But the context in the world overall in recent years has shifted mightily. Because look, while farmers have long been open to autonomous technologies in the past, I mean, if you've got like a family farm where there's only, so many people, they don't have a huge number of employees working the farm, that type of customer is going to be a lot more open to the idea of a tractor that can be programmed. And again, because a lot of the stuff that's going on in crops, right, is volume work rather than a lot of like skill work that you would see like on an excavator or a dozer or a grader. So farmers are not necessarily worried about, their reputations or their skills being lost. They're more worried about production, hitting quotas, accuracy. So they've been a lot more open to autonomous technologies, getting more technology into the cab of their tractors so that they can become better farmers. They've been more open to these autonomous technologies in the past. The construction industry, on the other hand, has always really been a harder sell. And that's because there are seasoned operators and business owners that have long looked at these autonomous machines with a highly skeptical and in some cases downright distrustful eye. Many machine operation jobs require a high degree of skill. There's just no bones about it. You have to be good to get in these cabs. And operators don't like the idea of a software patch or a new machine being able to replace a skill that they have personally worked for decades to gain. And meanwhile, owners would rather put their trust and their investment into that person that they've either trained up or that person that they know has this specific skill set. Owners of these construction companies are far more trusting and would rather put that investment into a person than a piece of technology. But in the last couple of years, things have really kind of changed. And I think a lot of that has been due not only to the labor shortage and kind of the idea that the number of workers that we had in the construction industry that were interested in these jobs, there's kind of like a coalescing around the idea that those numbers may never be seen again. But then also in the last couple of years, our collective conversation around autonomy as really kind of like a society, as the human race, as we've talked more and more about AI and autonomy and how it's going to integrate within our lives. And then the fact that, you have the entire S&P 500 in the United States, our entire market almost tied to whether or not this technology does what the CEOs of Microsoft and OpenAI and Google say that it's going to do, which is nothing short of transforming the world around us. There's a lot of money that's been invested in that bet. And then a lot of money as well to make sure that that bet pays off, either by brute force or just by kind of like acknowledging the problems that we have. This conversation around AI has really kind of changed a lot of the way that we talk about and think about this technology. And so as a result, I think a lot of the skepticism and the kind of perception of the technology has softened even in the construction industry. And like I said, that might be the near constant deluge of news surrounding the progress of AI, or it might just be kind of like admitting that there's a big problem and we do need something to solve it. And look, it was a very real thing in the past that certain companies would have been very wary to talk about autonomy because they didn't want to anger their customer base. The customer base was focused on empowering its people with the right tools and the companies didn't want to make it seem like they weren't focused on making the right tools, and they were instead trying to replace the people that they had invested in, right? So that's kind of softened as they've seen the kind of customer reaction to the technology soften in the conversations they're having personally with their customers. They're going to start talking about it more. And also, they'd just be crazy, these companies, these big companies would be crazy not to signal to shareholders that they are working on implementing AI into their product portfolio. And over the next several years, it might even be something that is important to customers as well. As of right now, it's definitely still kind of 50-50. We've softened in our skepticism of it, but we also still kind of remain like, well, there hasn't been a huge payoff yet to all of this investment in AI. Meanwhile, electrification and remote control, those two things really go hand in hand with the conversation around AI, with just kind of like the technology of artificial intelligence. And you can actually trace this connection all the way back to the Tier 4 regulations that started to phase in around 2008, and then they were fully implemented by around 2015. Now, these regulations were aimed at reducing emissions from off-road trucks and equipment, and they had a dramatic impact, not just on emissions, but really with how machines were designed overall. OEMs were faced with the puzzle of creating smarter engines, right? More efficient engines that didn't pollute as much. And as a result, engines and the machines that they reside in, they've become a lot more complex as modern electrical harnesses and the CAN bus, all of that kind of replaced the mechanical connections and old wiring harnesses of the past as a result. And those changes, the changes that were brought on by Tier 4, those changes have made modern construction equipment more fuel efficient, and ag equipment more fuel efficient and less polluting. And they were also crucial in making these machines ready to accept and support electrification and automation technologies because of all those changes to the electronics throughout the machine. And if you were going to name two technologies at the forefront of moving not just the construction industry forward, but the whole world into the future, you'd really be hard-pressed to come up with two more important technologies than electrification and automation. And look, we're not going to get lost in the debate over electrification and fossil fuels. The fact of the matter is that electrification and research around electrification and alternative fuels in general, that research and development, it represents the search for better fuels. We're calling it alternative fuels because you have one dominant fuel in the world right now, but we need better fuels, right? Fuels that reduce cost, reduce downtime, and improve efficiency and productivity. Right now, the best fuel for most jobs is still diesel, but the promise of battery electric machines in some applications, it's there today, right? Indoor applications. We're starting to find more and more of these things. And moving to hydrogen or hybrid machines, that might make sense in the future. So you might actually have like a future where you've got hybrid machines at 33%, hydrogen machines at 33%, diesel at 33%, or it might shake out differently with electrification and battery stuff, we don't know. But that promise of these alternative fuels, it cuts across all industries, ag, construction, logistics, you name it. That was a big theme of the Volvo Group kind of keynote, right? Was this search and this dedication for greater logistics efficiencies, finding better fuels, having the equipment that runs those better fuels, etc. And really the interesting thing there too is that when you dedicate the time to exploring those alternative fuels and you unlock those alternative fuels, and then you also add in the automation factor and you add automation to a better, more cost-efficient fuel, then you kind of have efficiencies from automation, you have efficiencies from the alternative fuel, right? And when you combine them, then you're able to scale those things even further. And so they kind of enhance the benefits of the other. So their changes implemented by Tier 4 regulations really resulted in industrial equipment becoming very high-tech tools very quickly. These are now machines that can be powered by batteries and controlled and even upgraded by software. So really, there's no better gadget at CES than the ag equipment and construction equipment that we're starting to see at these shows. They are the ultimate gadgets, and maybe they really define what this show is supposed to be about. So in a way, they fit in perfectly at CES. Construction and ag equipment manufacturers, heavy equipment manufacturers, truck makers, car makers, they fit in perfectly at CES just because of the way that our world is changing. And the way that our world is changing has kind of made us rethink, things that used to be solely mechanical and analog. And how do we translate those things into a digital future? And I can't wait to see what these companies show us at CES in the future, because no doubt it will be the foundation of the world to come. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our video. Just kind of opining on construction equipment and heavy equipment and the role it plays in our future and in a show like CES. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did like this video, do us a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to our channel, Compact Equipment. And if you want more in-depth coverage of the compact equipment and construction industry, be sure to check out our website, compactequip.com. Thank you guys so much for watching. We always appreciate the time. We'll see you in the next one.